Right, so I'm going to teach you how to insert a zip now. This is a standard zip again. I'm going to do a slightly different method to the previous one, the previous video. And I'm going to also teach you how to insert a zip where you've got an existing facing or waistband in position like we have here. So these pink sections are your facing and this is your main garment piece. So the first thing we're going to want to do is make sure we've got the alignment of the garment completely accurate, and this is where we will use a nesting technique. So what we want to do is measure the seam allowance, which in this case is 1.5 centimeters or 5/8, and I'm going to place a pin in there, okay? And I'm going to fold it at that 5/8, and I'm going to place the pin on the stitching line through the other side, and I'm going to just make sure that's all pinned in position. And by doing that, what we have done is we've been able to make sure that this stitching line here and these two parts of your garment are going to be perfectly aligned. Okay, so that's the nesting technique. So like before, we're going to now place the zip over the edge, and we're going to mark onto the fabric exactly where we want it to stop. Okay, so with this zip, the stoppers at the top are here and the stopper at the bottom is there. So if I just mark that for visual sake. Now we want the stoppers to be sitting just on the underside of that stitching line. So we're going to place that there, and I'm going to mark the corresponding finish point here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just stitch down with a normal stitch length, reverse stitching a lot here because that's going to be the bottom of the zip. So I'll go and do that, and then I'll teach you the second method of inserting a zip. So that's been sewn, and I've just taken this pin away. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open up the seam allowances. So what we're going to do is we're going to press all the way up through the facing, and we're going to make sure that that is sitting at the seam allowance, which is 1.5 centimeters, and we're going to do the same on the other side. So you'll end up with an open seam allowance. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to open up the zip. So unlike before where we had placed basting stitches on, what we are going to do is we're going to unzip this. We're going to place it with the zip tab down, so we're working from the wrong side of the zip, and we're going to align the stopper just underneath the facing, and we're going to get that coil sitting right up against the folded edge. Okay, and one way you can do it to make sure you've got a nice clean edge is to lift your seam allowance up 90 degrees and then use the flat part of the surface that you're working with, whether it's an ironing board in my case or a table, to pin this all into position. Okie dokie. You can do the same on the other side, and then we'll go and sew it. Right, so this has all been pinned just to the seam allowance, so we're not using the main garment piece, and I'm going to start working on this side. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is unfold the main garment piece. We're just working on this bit of tape and this seam allowance. So I'm going to place my tail thread at the back, and I'm going to position the zip foot over the coil about 2 or 3 millimeters down from the stopper, and the reason why is because the stopper is ever so slightly wider than the coil, which means that you don't get a kind of nice clean finish to the edge. Okay, so that's all sitting beautifully. And what I'm going to do, we're not going to base this one, we're just going to go for it. So we're going to be brave. So I'm going to take out that pin and I'm going to just run a couple of initial stitches and then do reverse stitches, and then I'm going to run that all the way down, just allowing the foot and the coils to lead the stitching. And if you are worried that it isn't going to be straight or you're going to lose integrity in the structure, then you can obviously run a basting stitch without any much of an issue. But once you get confident, you shouldn't really need to. Okay, so I'm going to stop about here, and the reason why is because I want to show you how you can lift the tab up through the zip and carry on stitching in one go. So what you need to do is put your needle in, and we're going to lift the foot up, and it is a little bit clumsy, this bit, but if you grab the tab and just pull it up underneath your foot, and then lower your zip foot down again, you can then continue your stitching line in one go. Fantastic. And that's done. So what I'm going to do is the other side, and then I'll show you how to finish this off. So this has now been stitched, and it's sitting actually really neatly in the seam allowance. There's no puckering there, and this is aligned, so that's fantastic. So I'm now going to teach you how to finish off this little seam allowance so that you get a really neat finish when you close off your facing. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to unzip our coils, and we're going to again just be working on the seam allowance. Now what we've got is a bit of zip tab here, and I'm going to fold this raw edge over to this raw edge, okay, and then I'm going to fold my facing over. I'm going to line that raw edge to raw edge, and I'm going to put a little pin in there. Okay, so there's a few ways you can do this, but this is a really neat way to finish off your facing. So what you should be able to see, if I take this nice and close, is that's the facing stitching line on the garment, and you want that to be sitting nice and flat. So I've put a pin in there, and what I'm going to do is I'm now going to sew this facing down to the bottom, roughly at the same position I sewed the zip on. So I'll go and do that, and I'll show you the result. Right, so that's been stitched all the way down, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim some of this excess out of the equation now. Okay, and then we can snip right the way, cornering off that area, and trimming it all the way down, so that when you turn this over to the right side, what you have is a very beautiful finish to this zip and facing. Okay, so that's method one, and to be honest, that is my preferred method. There is an alternative method, and again, you have your zip open and you are working with just your seam allowance. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take, if you look at the layers of this, we've got our tab, we've got the facing, and then we've got the seam allowance of the facing. So what we're going to do is we're going to snip just that facing bit, not the seam allowance, but just the facing bit. We're going to finish the snip just before this seam allowance edge. And the idea is that you're able to tuck in the excess tab between the facing and the seam allowance. I might actually just snip that ever so slightly more, just to give myself a bit of a head start. There we go. And then we do exactly as we did before. We fold it over and we place a pin in it and we stitch from the edge all the way to the edge. So I'll go and do that and I'll show you the result. Okay, so that's now been stitched. And like before, I'm going to take the corner off this and trim some of the excess away, and you have got another very neat finish to your zip. So if I turn this one through, there we go, you'll be able to see that is finished off really neatly. I'm just going to give that a little press and then I'll zip that up, and that is how you finish off your facings when you've got a zip.